At that moment, however, none of that had happened. All anyone knew was that one boat was in trouble, and Nolan Wells was no longer with the people who would soon return to shore. As daylight faded on the 4th of July, what had begun as a holiday celebration quickly became a missing person search. When Nolan failed to return with the rest of the group, concern spread among both his family and authorities. Horn Island may be a popular destination during the day, but after sunset, it becomes a far more challenging environment. Darkness, changing tides, open Gulf waters, and the island's distance from the mainland make search operations significantly more difficult. Every passing hour increased the uncertainty. Local agencies launched an extensive search, joined by marine units that combed the waters surrounding Horn Island. Boats searched the shoreline while helicopters and additional resources were deployed, hoping Nolan had simply become separated from his friends or stranded somewhere on the island. For Nolan's family, those hours were filled with agonizing uncertainty. Every phone call brought hope. Every update carried the possibility of either relief or heartbreak. Like countless families of missing persons, they endured the painful wait between optimism and fear, never knowing what the next call would bring. Nearly 2 days after Nolan was last seen, that hope came to an end. Search teams recovered his body in the waters near Horn Island, ending the rescue effort and beginning a death investigation. Investigators immediately began reconstructing Nolan's final hours. Detectives worked to establish an accurate timeline, identify everyone who had been with him that day, review photographs and videos, and compare witness statements. With thousands of people on the island during the holiday weekend, determining who last saw Nolan and exactly when became a major focus. As public attention intensified, multiple law enforcement agencies joined the investigation. Local authorities continued leading the case while working alongside state and federal partners to examine the growing volume of evidence. The FBI's involvement drew widespread attention, though officials emphasized that federal assistance does not automatically indicate a crime has been confirmed. Federal agencies often provide investigative resources, technical expertise, and specialized support in complex cases. At the same time, Nolan's family sought answers independently, rather than relying only on the official medical examination. They commissioned an independent autopsy in hopes of gaining additional clarity about the cause and manner of Nolan's death. Independent medical opinions can either reinforce or differ from official findings, and they often become an important part of both the investigation and the broader public discussion. Throughout this process, authorities consistently urged patience. Investigators cautioned the public against rushing to conclusions, explaining that witness interviews, forensic examinations, digital evidence, and physical evidence all require careful analysis before any final determination can be made. Despite growing speculation online, officials made clear that the investigation would follow the evidence wherever it led. Then the case took an unexpected turn. It wasn't because of a new witness, it wasn't because of surveillance footage, and it wasn't because of a major forensic breakthrough. Instead, it was an emergency assistance call, recorded during the chaos of that afternoon, that would soon become the most talked about piece of evidence in the entire investigation. Throughout the investigation, authorities remained cautious in their public statements. Officials repeatedly urged the public not to jump to conclusions, emphasizing that witness interviews, forensic examinations, digital evidence, and physical evidence all require careful analysis before any determination can be made. Despite growing speculation online, investigators stressed that they would follow the evidence wherever it led. Then, the case took an unexpected turn. It wasn't because of a new witness, it wasn't because of surveillance footage, and it wasn't because of a major forensic breakthrough. Instead, it was an emergency assistance call recorded during the chaos of July 4th that dramatically changed how the public viewed the investigation. Every major investigation has a defining moment. Sometimes it's DNA evidence, sometimes it's security footage. In Nolan Wells' case, that moment came when the emergency call from one of the departing boats leaked to the public.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking.
And what do you want to do? Do you want to be towed back?
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back, yes. There are 0 adults on board. Nobody here is over the age of 21.
Mississippi Department of Marine Resources reported his friends saying Wells was in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain at the island. As searchers began scanning the island and surrounding waters, this email obtained by ABC News shows the preliminary information they were given, describing Wells as a black male, 6'1", 180 pounds, wearing shorts only. The Marine Patrol listed his alcohol intake as heavy. The state's autopsy...
Multiple voices overlap. People speak rapidly. Wind, waves, and engine noise make much of the conversation difficult to hear. But listeners soon focused on what they believed were additional voices in the background. Some claimed they heard someone in distress. Others believed they heard references to Nolan himself. As these interpretations spread across TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and X, every replay seemed to generate another theory. The public quickly divided into 2 groups. One believed the recording contained crucial evidence that could explain Nolan's final moments. They argued that the background sounds deserved intense scrutiny and might reveal what really happened. The other urged caution. Audio experts have long warned about auditory pareidolia, the tendency for people to hear familiar words or phrases in unclear sounds, especially after someone suggests what they should be hearing. Once one interpretation spreads online, many listeners begin hearing the same thing, even if it cannot be objectively confirmed. That is why investigators rely on forensic analysis rather than internet opinion. Professional audio specialists examine original recordings instead of compressed social media clips. They evaluate recording quality, background interference, microphone limitations, environmental conditions, and whether sounds can actually be distinguished from wind, water, engines, or overlapping conversations. Law enforcement has not publicly confirmed that the emergency call contains evidence proving a crime occurred, nor have investigators officially verified many of the phrases circulating online. That distinction matters. A viral theory is not evidence. A widely shared interpretation is not a verified forensic finding. Authorities continue evaluating the recording alongside witness interviews, physical evidence, digital records, and forensic examinations. Any evidentiary value the audio ultimately has will be determined by investigators, not by social media. Even so, the leaked call undeniably transformed public perception, intensified demands for transparency, and increased pressure to determine exactly what happened on Horn Island. While millions debated the recording, detectives continued searching for something far more important than theories. Facts. As the investigation continued, Nolan Wells's story spread far beyond Mississippi. What began as a local tragedy became a national conversation. Millions followed every update through news reports, podcasts, YouTube videos, and social media. The leaked audio fueled even more speculation, while countless online communities attempted to reconstruct the events of July 4th. Attention also focused on the friends who had been with Nolan that day. Their statements, interviews, and reported timelines came under intense scrutiny. Some spoke publicly, while others remained largely silent. Attorneys representing individuals connected to the case urged the public not to mistake online accusations for established facts, reminding people that speculation often spreads faster than verified evidence. For Nolan's family, however, the focus never changed. They weren't interested in winning debates online. They wanted answers. Family members continued calling for a complete and transparent investigation, thanking volunteers and supporters while urging authorities to examine every piece of evidence thoroughly. As public attention grew, so did expectations for investigators. Every interview, document, and official statement was analyzed in extraordinary detail, making the case one of the most closely watched investigations in Mississippi. Yet behind every headline, every theory, and every viral post remained a grieving family asking one question: what truly happened to Nolan Wells on Horn Island? In every true crime investigation, there comes a point where evidence must speak louder than speculation. The story of Nolan Wells has captured national attention because of the heartbreaking loss of an 18-year-old whose future had only begun. A crowded island, friends who returned home, a missing teenager, a leaked emergency call. Each development has added another layer to a case that remains unresolved. But investigations are not solved through comment sections or viral videos. They are solved through careful detective work, forensic science, verified witness testimony, and evidence that can withstand scrutiny. While millions have formed opinions about what happened on Horn Island, investigators have a different responsibility: to determine not what people believe happened, but what the evidence can actually prove. The 4th of July is meant to be a day of fireworks, family, and celebration. Along Mississippi's Gulf Coast, thousands of people headed to Horn Island, a barrier island known for its white sand beaches, crystal waters, and packed holiday crowds. Boats lined the shoreline, music echoed across the Gulf, and friends gathered under the summer sun. For nearly everyone there, it was just another Independence Day. But somewhere in that sea of people, something happened that no one has been able to fully explain. 18-year-old Nolan Wells arrived at Horn Island with friends. By the end of the day, those friends returned to the mainland without him. Nearly 2 days later, search crews found Nolan's body near the same shoreline where he had last been seen alive. At first, many believed the tragedy was simply a devastating accident. Then questions began to surface. Timelines appeared to conflict. Statements from people who had been with Nolan raised new concerns for his family. Weeks later, a leaked emergency assistance call from one of the boats changed the conversation again, with countless people replaying the recording in search of hidden clues. Whether those interpretations are accurate remains disputed. What is not disputed is that a holiday celebration became one of Mississippi's most closely watched investigations, leaving one family searching for the truth about what happened on Horn Island. By midday, on July 4th, 2026, Horn Island looked exactly as it does every Independence Day. Located just off Mississippi's Gulf Coast, the narrow barrier island had become a destination for hundreds of boats carrying families, college students, and groups of friends eager to spend the holiday together. Music drifted across the water, coolers covered the sand, and laughter carried from one anchored boat to the next. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like the perfect American summer celebration. Among those crowds was 18-year-old Nolan Wells. According to later accounts, he was spending the day with a large group of friends, roughly 2 to 3 dozen young people, who had arrived on multiple boats. The island was anything but isolated. Thousands of people filled the beaches, and boats stretched along the shoreline as far as the eye could see. There were countless potential witnesses nearby, yet investigators would later struggle to piece together exactly what happened. Throughout the afternoon, Nolan was reportedly seen moving between groups, talking with friends and enjoying the holiday. Nothing publicly known from those early hours suggested that the day would become the focus of a statewide investigation. Then the plans began to change. As people prepared to leave, one of the boats reportedly developed mechanical problems. According to later statements, the vessel began experiencing issues while getting ready for the trip back to the mainland. Some members of the group boarded boats heading home, while Nolan reportedly remained behind on the island. At the time, those choices likely seemed routine. No one could have known that who boarded which boat, who stayed behind, and who left first would later become some of the most scrutinized moments in the investigation. By sunset, fireworks continued across Mississippi's coastline. For Nolan Wells, however, the celebration had already come to an end. Long before his name appeared in headlines, Nolan Wells was simply an 18-year-old looking forward to the future. To his family and friends, he wasn't a mystery or a national news story. He was a son, a teammate, a classmate, and someone whose adult life was only beginning. Like many young people growing up along Mississippi's Gulf Coast, Nolan enjoyed spending time outdoors. Summers meant days on the water, weekends with friends, and making memories before adulthood. Football was also an important part of his life, connecting him with teammates through years of practices, road trips, victories, and disappointments. Those shared experiences often build lifelong friendships rooted in trust. That is one reason this case immediately stood out. The people who spent that day with Nolan were not strangers. They were classmates, teammates, and members of his local community. At first, Many assumed those close relationships would make it easier to understand what happened. Instead, they became one of the investigation's greatest mysteries. As news of Nolan's disappearance spread, family members described a young man with his entire future ahead of him. Friends remembered someone who enjoyed being around people and looked forward to spending holidays with those closest to him. Nothing about that July morning suggested it would be the last time anyone would see him alive. When search crews recovered Nolan's body nearly 2 days later, grief quickly turned into questions. His family was no longer just mourning the loss of a son. They were trying to understand how someone could disappear during one of the busiest days of the year while surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands of people. The case soon reached far beyond Mississippi's Gulf Coast. Millions followed each new development online. Public attention grew not only because of the unusual circumstances surrounding Nolan's disappearance, but also because he was a young black teenager whose final known hours were spent with a predominantly white group of friends, a fact that sparked broader public discussion and intensified calls for a thorough investigation. Yet beyond every headline, every theory, and every debate on social media stood a grieving family asking one question: what happened to Nolan Wells after the celebration ended? To understand why this case continues to generate so many questions, it's necessary to carefully reconstruct the events of July 4th. While investigators are still examining evidence, and some details remain disputed, the overall timeline has emerged through public statements, interviews, emergency communications, and official reporting. That morning began like countless Independence Day celebrations along Mississippi's Gulf Coast. Friends made plans to spend the holiday at Horn Island, a popular destination several miles offshore, where every summer, hundreds of boats gather side by side to create what many describe as a floating community. For Nolan Wells and his friends, it was expected to be nothing more than a day of swimming, relaxing, and celebrating together. For Nolan Wells and his friends, the trip to Horn Island was expected to be nothing more than a day of swimming, relaxing, and celebrating the 4th of July. According to public reports, the group traveled on multiple boats rather than a single vessel. Friends arrived throughout the day, joining hundreds of other visitors already gathered along the beach. Some stayed on shore while others moved between anchored boats. Music echoed across the Gulf. Conversations blended together, and people wandered freely from one group to another. It was loud, crowded, and appeared completely ordinary. Photos and videos posted online from that holiday captured the familiar 4th of July atmosphere Gulf Coast residents know well. Boats lined along the shoreline, coolers scattered across the sand, families grilling food, and teenagers laughing with friends during one of the busiest weekends of the year. Somewhere within that crowd, Nolan spent the afternoon with people he knew. As the day went on, however, the group's plans reportedly changed. According to later statements, one of the boats experienced mechanical problems while preparing to leave the island. Reports indicated that the vessel began taking on water, creating an urgent situation that demanded immediate attention. Instead of focusing on the holiday, those aboard shifted their attention to keeping the boat afloat and getting help before conditions worsened. That mechanical emergency would later become one of the most closely examined moments in the investigation, exactly how everyone reorganized. During those final moments remains under investigation. Public accounts describe people moving between boats as transportation plans changed. Some passengers reportedly left for the mainland, while others stayed behind on Horn Island as the group dealt with the damaged vessel. Among those reportedly left behind was Nolan Wells. Island has become one of the case's central questions. Public statements from individuals connected to the group suggest the decision occurred while everyone's attention was focused on the mechanical emergency. At the time, there was reportedly no indication that anyone believed Nolan was in immediate danger. Those present have described the situation as temporary, expecting transportation could be arranged once the boat's problems were resolved. What appeared to be an ordinary logistical decision would later be viewed very differently. As water continued entering the damaged boat, its occupants placed an emergency assistance call requesting help. In those tense moments, the priority was simply keeping the vessel afloat and reaching safety. No one making that call could have imagined that investigators, journalists, and millions of people would later analyze every second of the recording, searching for clues about Nolan's disappearance.